Okay, so here I am on a tent supply raid. Time is short. I set off the alarm. Typical. Quick check. Nothing nearby. Better make this quick. Nothing. Looking for medicine. Nothing. Damn, is that thumping on the windows? Ah, that's a smash. One got in. One bite can end it all. You need to be careful. Whoa! Come on, come on. Okay, they're at the door. Out the window. Oh, come on! Yes! Run, Subjeep, run! Oh, they're louder than I remember. Jeez, joining a big crowd. Way too big. Need to get out of here. Little car. Another day done. Project Zomboid is a post-apocalyptic survival simulator that takes place within a massive fictional region of Louisville, Kentucky, encompassing countless rural and urban areas, from housing districts and commercial high streets to farmsteads and entire forests. The sheer scope of paths available to the player is staggering, which is exactly the point. Where would you go in a real zombie apocalypse? Well, Project Zomboid lets you figure that one out for yourself. Where other games might prioritize cutting-edge graphics or multiplayer extravaganzas, Zomboid instead puts its entire focus on providing an immersive experience with an ambience so rich it can stay with you for hours after the screen goes black. Project Zomboid is a bit of an odd name, which I think is a shame because it puts people off. It was first started by 4 students from the UK and Canada in 2010 who would go on to found themselves as the Indie Stone. They were inspired not by zombie games but instead by zombie movies and shows. And despite a burglary in 2011 that resulted in the loss of most of their code, a very harsh lesson in off-site backups, it had already begun to draw the fan base that would continue to spur them on. For those of you who haven't heard of this game yet, you've arrived at a very good time. Reported to be the longest running early access game on Steam, which means it still is technically in development. Project Zomboid has, in theory, been playable for years and is simply an ongoing passion project that never stops evolving, hence the name. And I mean that. Every year I jump back in and it feels like it's good to go, and every year that passes by it gets better, slowly ingesting fan-made mods into the core game. 10 years in, and the many layers of complexity in the game really show. Campaigns have only recently been offered from the outset, if indeed that's your poison. I confess I did think I'd want a defined story carefully laid out ahead of me when I first played, but in truth, the very best experiences I had when you allow the game to just drop you, weaponless, underskilled and pretty under-equipped, just like your average citizen really, somewhere on the staggeringly vast map. There are no running zombies, mutant dogs or swarms of infected crows, just your classic shuffling zombie and the potential for one to become hundreds if it all goes wrong. And that, my friends, is the crux of the game. It almost always goes wrong. When you first start a new world, before a comically inappropriate avatar arrives on screen to rub your nose in it, an introductory message explains your fate. This is how you died. This is a precursor to the inevitable bite or ailment that ultimately kills you off. For an open-ended game with no clear direction beyond surviving, I just didn't expect to get so hooked. But as soon as your first character gets bitten and you get over the inevitable frustration, before you know it you'll be counting the seconds for them to die off just so you can get stuck back in and have another go. You can create a new survivor and jump back into the same world and go find your original belongings alongside your tragically zombified character. If you're playing with one or more friends, you'll have no choice because they'll still be playing. But if the option is available to you, then you'll probably want to boot the whole world up again from scratch because it runs on a timer. Fresh food spoils over time, water and gas is shut off after a fortnight, and watching certain pre-recorded TV shows will provide useful XP buffs, but they're only broadcast for a few days. All of these dwindling resources play their part in simulating the predictable collapse of infrastructure. This encourages you to use your early time wisely, while ultimately pursuing a long-term goal of sustainable living. A task which can play out in countless different ways depending on where you begin, where you end up, what you find, what skills you start with, and what you learn on your journey. Many games will claim that no two experiences are alike, but Zomboid really takes this to another level. Early game you can flirt with different paths such as fishing, trapping, farming and so on, because food can be scavenged, water can still be drawn from taps, and leveling up is quick, but eventually you'll need to have leveled up one path in particular to such an extent that it'll keep you fed and strong. Starting next to a river will make it a lot easier to achieve this in fishing, or happening upon a garden centre full of tools and seeds might present you with a path in agriculture. What you find will heavily influence your physical and literal path, but if you don't hoard resources like fuel and prepare for long-term living early game when times are less tough, then it will eventually catch up to you later in the game and put you in as much peril as the zombies might. Malnutrition, hunger, catching a bad cold, getting an infected wound, sleep deprivation. Many of these real-world threats are present and accounted for, and it will cause you a good deal of trouble if you don't source a suitable home base and equip it to battle these challenges accordingly. Navigating a city, staying hydrated, fixing your clothes, washing the blood off your clothes, looting different buildings, marking up your map, rearranging your backpack, keeping an eye on the time, keeping an eye out for peril. These tasks will fill your day. Project Zomboid tentatively refers to itself as a simulator for a reason. Hungry? Eat food. Tinned goods or a rotting vegetable? What do you think? Can't open the tin? Probably need a can opener then. Uncooked? Find an oven. No power? Find a barbecue. No fuel? Raid a garden shed. It's not unusual to have to eat food in a game, but few of them approach this task with so many granular steps as Zomboid. Wearing clothes is no longer about expressing yourself as it is in the real world and actually a lot of games these days. In Zomboid, clothes offer protection to the various parts of your body, but thick jumpers and heavy jackets will take their toll if you find yourself sprinting through the midday sun, as temperature and weather are taken into account. Over the long term, that means seasonal changes that demand you focus not just on your wardrobe, but also how to heat your base. By default, the game starts on the 9th of July and a fixed year of 1993. So that's summer, and on a side note, it's a time when mobile phones don't exist. If you pick a scenario that starts months down the line, then as well as witnessing a world that's actually started to erode, you'll also face a whole new challenge as you take on the cold weather. In the short term, conditions can change quickly, with spooky fog and heavy rain affecting your character in yet more ways, with the risk of a bad cold and so on dramatically increased if you go outside and get soaking wet during a storm. When you first build your survivor, you'll pick a starting profession and then distribute your skill points accordingly. Different professions can give you a head start in some areas, such as a burglar who can hotwire cars. You then generate your oh so valuable attribute points by selecting handicaps. You want thick skin or a character with particularly good hearing, then you might opt for a character who gets overly thirsty or gets easily frightened. Underweight is a favourite of mine, providing a heap of points at the cost of raw strength, but this can be mitigated by gorging oneself on high calorie goods that are abundant early game. Another favourite of mine is smoker. My character would get agitated and underperform without sparking up a cigarette every hour, meaning early game I would be desperately keeping my eye out for smokes and a lighter or matches. I remember keeping watch while a friend siphoned petrol from an abandoned car. As I waited, I thought it might be an ideal time to light one up. An anxiety attack when being chased by zombies can get you killed in-game, and I knew I could shelve that concern for a few minutes. As I watched my character light up and enjoy a brief moment of solace amongst the unfriendly surroundings, I felt a touch of stress release. My character was less tense. I was less tense. The game layers up these challenges, and the enjoyment you draw from overcoming countless little hurdles, one after another, all the while going about your daily tasks and managing to stay alive. It empowers you, and in time results in a character who's grown under your careful guidance into a genuine survivor. And it's not just about your survivor, whose tragically short story unfolds under your watchful eye. If you keep your eyes open, you'll find many other stories that are told through the belongings of the dead. Cops with guns that could have anything from a full mag to being empty depending on how they died. Zombies with a knife sticking out their back as they lumber towards you. Houses that have been burned down. Look around you and you might find a zombie with a clue as to what happened. One home I found had boarded up windows, but the reason wasn't revealed until I found stockpiles of weapons inside. This was a survivor's last stand. The owner herself had little on her except for a walkie-talkie, so she was talking to somebody. But who? I never found out on this run. Despite the world being inundated with what appears to be junk, virtually everything in the game has a function. An umbrella serves as a weapon, sure, but it also can be opened to protect you from the rain. A plastic bag can be carried in one hand to contain items. A magazine can be pulled from an unused weapon, loaded up with ammo and kept in your inventory for a quick reload. Pans can be used for cooking, clothes as clothes or ripped into rags. You only need to scroll through the list of available medicine after you start to stockpile it to get an idea of the types of challenges you might face. And these are just some of the layers of complexity that I mentioned earlier. Overheating, getting sick, getting wet. These types of things don't actually happen that often in real life, nor do they happen that often in the game, but they do happen. And when they do, the tools at your disposal to meet these challenges are expansive, and in most cases actually pretty self-explanatory, because at the end of the day, the game just does its best to simulate reality and doesn't generate challenge for the sake of it. Performing an action provides XP toward leveling up, just like in a regular RPG. If you find a book on the subject that caters to the level range that you're currently in for that particular skill, it'll provide a substantial boost to the XP gains. The speed of leveling up stays true to its simulator roots, and even more so at higher levels. In fact, I've never measured it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were pursuing the 10,000 hours to master a skill concept in the game. I expect it's been modeled in such a way that if you truly are able to build a sustainable life for your character, the latter half of your game is simply spent living and growing. I rarely get that far without bending the rules, although I look forward to the day that I do. When my friends and I play, we tend to customize the options on the server and tweak the XP gains to different extents. This will always be guided by the most pious of the group, demanding that we don't push it too far or else spoil the experience. And so we've played on everything from no changes up to heavily modifying. My preference lies somewhere around the 5x multiplier. There's very little wizardry or advanced knowledge required to tweak these settings. You just make your choices when creating your multiplayer world, catering to whatever time restrictions or general gaming preferences you might have. A bite or a scratch can infect you, but in our early days we found ourselves burning through too many survivors, and so we altered it so that only a bite could infect you. I mean, hey, you don't like onions in your burger? Chuck them out. There is a single caveat to this, and that's the reading speed. For some reason they left this out of the customizable options. Real time, that takes your character just over 9 minutes to read a book. As keen as I am on immersive gaming, my friends and I just don't have the time required to pursue such lofty ambitions, and so in our case our hands are forced. So if you are tight for time and you want to get stuck in anyway, for guidance on how to tweak the settings, including an extra step to amend the reading speed in the config file, check out my Project Zomboid tips and tricks video, link in the description. Now when it comes to the hands-on gameplay, controlling the character is easy to get to grips with once you figure out the nuances of combat. Taking on a zombie is quite easy as long as you don't take your eye off the ball and continue to watch your back. Even 2 or 3 can be fought safely with a decent weapon and space to move, with weapons like baseball bats providing knockback and spears giving you an extra edge with range. Your point of view places black spots in your vision for areas that you can't see, such as behind or around corners, meaning that zombies will often appear out of the darkness as you swing your view around, complete with a jump scare sound effect to boot. The inventory management, on the other hand, will take a little practice to master. What at first feels like unintentionally clunky right-click menus and pop-up windows used to interact with containers in your inventory turn out to be an innovative way of matching the real-world time pressure of carefully dragging items from one list to another, with the in-game equivalent of your character fumbling with the physical items. Let me explain exactly what I mean. While hauling a flatbed full of pillaged goods back to our base, we ran down one too many zombies, damaging the front of the truck to the point of engine failure. Everything we needed was in that truck, including my precious Molotov cocktails. We returned a couple of days later, and while my friend tried in vain to use a car horn to distract the horde, I had to run to the truck, find a Molotov cocktail, and pull it out. The problem was there were about 100 items in the back. My character was searching in the dark for a case of bottles buried under a pile of junk. I was desperately scrolling and looking for the letter M. As I scrolled and scrolled, they drew closer and closer. It took me more than one attempt to achieve this without getting bitten. At night, surrounded by hundreds of zombies. On about my 6th run, I finally managed to get them, and by this time his car was immobilized and he was surrounded. We'd invested hours into the game at this point. There was no way I wanted to start again. It was safe to say I was panicking. Death would have been inevitable but for the fresh windows we'd thankfully installed earlier, and ultimately the effectiveness of the Molotov cocktail. Nothing but my bloodied machete and some fast footwork to keep me alive. I can't think of any game that simulates the stress of rooting through all the junk in the back of a truck while a crowd of genuinely deadly enemies lumber up behind you, and my adrenaline levels left me trembling. Suffice to say, we survived by the skin of our teeth. The soundtrack is wonderfully somber and surprisingly diverse, giving it a mysterious and sometimes even otherworldly sound. This is matched to a complete lack of living characters beyond other players, all of which helps provide a noticeable sense of loss and hopelessness, but also a fairly invigorating sense of freedom, leaving almost no place in the entire world outside of your scope. Because basically every structure, building, or even space has the potential to be your base, you'll constantly find yourself looking at the world through a very different lens. The choice of where is obviously no small thing, with towns offering quick access to extensive resources, and the countryside offering relative safety from the hordes, and offering you the freedom to get a farm, rain collectors, and a generator running. If you do err on the side of caution and you end up outside of town, then travelling back into the urban areas will result in tense supply raids as you ransack just about everything that looks like it has potential and isn't surrounded by zombies. If you settle on somewhere in town, then making such a location zombie-proof becomes the name of the game. But if you do, be prepared to cut and run and leave it all behind. Barricades that might take you hours to build can take a horde of zombies minutes to tear down. Like sneaking or sprinting, carpentry is one of the more universal skills, and practicing it unlocks countless different options as you progress through the levels, from simple walls and fences that provide outer security, through to staircases and advanced cabinets and so on that allow you to flesh out the interior and make it more livable. The related books are abundant, the TV offers level ups early in the game, and most furniture can be deconstructed by a hammer for continued skill points. If you find wooden barricades to be ineffective, or one of your teammates has a clear head start in carpentry, then why not pursue a mastery of metalwork instead, providing yet more effective ways to wall yourself in. Or somebody with the burglar perk can hotwire cars from the outset and use them to barricade an entrance. Working with teammates to cross off different skill trees allows for more efficient use of resources, but also reinforces the concept of role-playing within the game, as not all survivors would be made equal. If you want to experiment with different builds, there's nothing stopping you from throwing up the XP multiplier and jumping into a regular or even builder scenario where you can enjoy the luxury of a diminished zombie threat. This way you can explore the potential possibilities of what the higher levels will offer you, allowing you to then focus on a build that you might not have thought about when playing the long game with traditional settings. Lumberjack is one of my favourites, as the benefits of woodwork and carpentry lend heavily to those who enjoy base building like I do, but I'm also yet to survive more than a few days as an electrician or a metalworker, so even as a long-term player, the amount of content or potential builds that I'm still yet to experience is expansive. I found recipe books that speak of such wizardry as building devices to distract zombies or smoke bombs, but I've never even witnessed this in the game, much less built one myself. With a high level in cooking and the right recipes, you're able to combine different ingredients, which I presume results in high level food with some kind of a buff, but again, I've never even seen it, and I really look forward to the day that I do. What I love most about this game is that it makes you feel like you're playing out your own story from, say, The Walking Dead, or if you tweak the zombie speed, then 28 Days Later, or whatever you want. Whatever your preferred show or movie might be, the influence from zombie shows and movies is plain. By giving you more content and skill paths and locations than you could possibly visit on a single playthrough, the sense of personal freedom but also loss on the part of the wider human race is rife, as you treat every home, shop and dead body on the map as yours to take, and value it for no more than the sum of its contents. It's harrowing stuff, but just so immersive. To round off, I'll say this. The world gets increasingly less forgiving as the clock ticks on, eventually becoming a death trap to a player who hasn't stocked up, boarded up, planned up, and got a fleet of safe spaces and fully packed getaway solutions scattered across the land. At this point, there isn't a clear goal beyond just living and building, and waiting for a potential catastrophe to put your escape plans to the test. These catastrophes, known as meta events, do crop up, but their impact is subtle beyond pulling the board in your direction. Based on the ever-evolving parts of the game, such as campaigns, I presume this additional level of content may indeed be part of the Indie Stone's long-term vision. While the game makes it clear from the outset that this is not an adventure where you play to reach the end, that little narrative bone of mine does find itself twitching from time to time, and I look forward to when they might further enhance the campaigns available to the player. But if I've not already convinced you to at least go and look it up on Steam, then let me assure you that for its meager price tag, it'll be untold hours of gameplay before you find yourself wanting anything so grand as a story, as you'll be far too busy trying to survive. And by that point, you'll be a fan of the game waiting for the next version upgrade anyway. Project Zomboid is a purest example of why indie titles are becoming more popular than ever these days. With so many sequels and template-driven experiences on the market, Zomboid offers a completely novel experience to both new and veteran gamers yearning for fresh escapism. It offers slow-burning tension in lieu of fast-paced action. It offers genuine fulfillment from sinking hours into the game. It plays like no other game I know of, and even if you're not a complete zombie nerd, at some point it'll leave you thinking, where is the nearest place to where I live that I might consider holding up in a zombie apocalypse? But then again, that shouldn't really be a surprise, because this isn't really a game. It's a simulator.